May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Please be seated. We have now come to my very favorite place in the church year. Tomorrow is Epiphany, and through the great gift of the lectionary, we are able to read the Epiphany reading. It's one of our options today. And Father Emmanuel has just read that for us. Epiphany is when we celebrate the arrival of the Magi, the wise men, often called the three kings, who are all coming to the side of the manger where Jesus is born. While the Magi have developed a larger-than-life persona and presence in Christian and even cultural imagination and tradition, our hymns, our art, our nativity scenes, even Christmas pageants, all of what we actually know about the Magi comes and is expressed in no more than 18 verses, about 60 lines of text in only the Gospel of Matthew. And exactly what we know about the Magi from that text is also limited. They only exist in Matthew's Gospel and only in the specific verses we read this morning. Yet these guys are really important. They clearly get the attention of Herod, and not only Herod, but all of those in Jerusalem, as they come into Jerusalem asking, "Where is the baby king?" And when Herod hears that the Magi are looking for the child who has been born King of the Jews, he was frightened, and all of Jerusalem with him. The Magi also have sufficient reputational cachet, or maybe, professional expertise, to warrant Herod's secret summons. He calls them to court, where he gives them a commission, like an engagement, and then an assignment for a follow-up report. And not only do the Magi occupy the thoughts and actions of Herod and all of Jerusalem from the time of their arrival until the full 8 verses after they've left the scene, they have our attention and have had our attention for roughly 20 centuries. A lot of attention, given they really aren't hanging around in Matthew's Gospel all that long. Just like we get the detail about all the animals around the manger scene at the Nativity from the word manger, a food trough for animals, we have imagined our own details for the Magi, a lot of them. What we know is that the Magi they lead us to Jesus, and they point to Jesus' divinity and Jesus' kingship. And the mystery and the ambiguity surrounding their identity, like where in the world they came from and where in the world they're going, allows them to assume different nations, different races, and different religions. What we do know is that they come from afar. They're not from the home office of the Roman Empire, or Herod wouldn't be so worked up about their arrival. And they're not from Bethlehem, or from the shepherds' fields, or even from Nazareth, where Mary and Joseph have come from. The Magi turn up in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born, the King of the Jews?" They say they saw his star at its rising. The Magi follow the star to Jerusalem until it stops right over the place where the child was, says the scripture, where they find Mary and Jesus. Once inside, the Magi knelt down and paid him homage, gave Jesus their gifts, and returned to their own country. So who are these Magi? Matthew tells us they're from the east. Jerusalem and Bethlehem, they're already in the Middle East from our Western perspective, although I've also heard it referred to as West Asia. The Magi say they saw Jesus' star at its rising, somewhere far east of Jerusalem. So they must know at least a little about astrology. The word used for them in Matthew's Gospel, magos, can mean a number of things. It can mean a Persian, a Babylonian. It can also mean a wise man or a priest who was expert in astrology. interpretation of dreams, and other various occult arts. Magos can also mean magician, and we know that the Magi are interpreters of dreams. Remember, they have a dream that tells them not to go back, even though Herod has told them to come back and report to him on this baby Jesus. And they go back by another road. The way Herod reacts when the Magi show up in Jerusalem shows that they're important. Herod immediately summons them to court, and he's not likely to have done that with just any old strangers, particularly strangers who might have had the social status of carnival workers or street magicians or performers. And we can tell that the Magi had enormous street cred from the fact of Herod's response to them, as well as from the gifts they bring and the purposes they name for their visit. The Magi are diplomats who recognize and pay homage to a foreign power with gifts and a state visit. The Magi are the ones in Matthew's Gospel who introduce us to the sacred. But who they are or where they're from is a mystery to us even now. We don't even know from the text that there are 3 of them. We've inferred that from the fact of the 3 gifts, the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh. And those are costly gifts. Those would have been royal types of gifts that wouldn't have been accessible to anyone other than a foreigner of great importance. The Magi show up in Bethlehem beside Mary and Joseph and Jesus and the shepherds. And we see beside the manger country and king's court, riches and poverty, simplicity and complexity, and familiar and foreign, all together around that newborn baby God in human skin. The Magi, known experts in stars and dreams, arrive in Jerusalem by the light of a star to both have and interpret a dream. And this all happens in Matthew's Gospel, where prophetic dreams are happening about 1 every 20 lines or so in those first couple of chapters. So the Magi are just the right guys for this job. Similarly, the Magi are apparent outsiders at Jesus' birth, who by their travel, by their gifts, their dignity, and their presence point to Jesus' divinity. The Magi get there to Jerusalem, the seat of the current king, and therefore a logical place to look for a new one, asking a simple question: where is this baby king? Herod's response, after he's pulled himself together and all of Jerusalem from their collective agitation at the arrival of the Magi, is to deploy his own staff's expertise to research the prophecy and direct the Magi to Jerusalem. The Magi have told Herod nothing that he didn't have in his own wheelhouse already. But they have signaled to him and to Matthew's subsequent audiences, to us, the importance of this watershed moment in the history of God's people. The Magi turn up as foreigners or social outsiders to all readers of Matthew's Gospel, even Matthew's original intended audience, because they are specifically presented as outsiders. Their foreignness is unchangeable. Matthew's description of them is so bare that we can't even begin to figure out where they're from, or their culture, or even what they do at home. What is their function in their own society? Even so, God speaks to them in a dream, sending them home by another road to escape Herod. Is this Matthew's hint? Is this Matthew's hint that maybe the Magi are not really foreigners at all? At least not to God? At least not to God's plan? The exotic name of Magi, their Eastern origin, and their expertise in stargazing, or at least star following, focuses our attention on the important way in which they are foreign or different from Herod and his court in Jerusalem. Only the Magi show up asking for the baby king. The mysterious origin and the social function of the Magi give all of us a chance to walk along in their sandals as they journeyed to Jesus and away from Herod's reign in Jerusalem. No one is excluded from the group gathered around Jesus at the manger, as we have no idea what that group might even be. Even if the Magi came from an east no farther from Jerusalem than Bethany, which is just a short walk across the Kidron Valley, their foreignness to the regime in Jerusalem allows any one of us, to walk as Magi to Bethlehem, to pay homage to Jesus. You probably know already, I'm not going to be happy till I mention camels, right? You know that's coming. Who else besides Mary, Joseph, the baby Jesus, the shepherds, the angels, and the Magi are beside the manger in Bethlehem? Mary was very pregnant when she and Joseph started the 2-day walk from Nazareth. So there must have been a donkey, right, to help her, to give her a ride along the way. Also in Bethlehem, where Jesus is born, Mary lays him in a manger, a food dish for animals. So we've always imagined that there must have been cows and other livestock at the birth. And shepherds, they show up. Scripture tells us that. Shepherds show up at the manger side after a multitude of angels appear in the sky over the fields where the shepherds tended to their sheep. So they're not going to walk off and leave those sheep, right? They must have brought the sheep with them when they went to the side of the manger to see the baby. So I ask you this: have you ever seen a manger scene that does not have camels? Camels are mentioned many times in Scripture, but they actually are not mentioned anywhere in this passage from Matthew about the Magi. But what other creature can you imagine that could point to the mystery and the distance of the Magi like the camel? They are the ships of the sand sea, uniquely and improbably built to maneuver perfectly over desert terrain. If there are Magi, there must have been camels. If you needed transport from afar in the east, 2,000 years ago, to follow a star, to get yourself to Jerusalem, to the manger side of the new king, how would you get across the Judean hills, the rough rocky plains and the deserts to Bethlehem? You'd need a uniquely fitted cargo vehicle, because you're carrying gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, right? And one that had great big sand transport feet, ears filled with soft fur, long eyelashes and nostrils that could close against a sandstorm to protect him. Might be just the ticket, especially if this sand cargo vehicle could go for 2 days without food or water. So from specs like that, just what you need to get the job done, would any human engineer have drawn a camel?